Have you ever felt like you're, constantly chasing something, and then just when you get it, there's another desire waiting right behind it?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of fleeting satisfaction.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's back to yearning, back to chasing the next thing that always seems just out of reach.
Or maybe you've had that other experience you mentioned where a piece of art or music maybe just completely stopped you in your tracks.
Right. And all that inner noise, the wanting, just quiets down. You get this brief, kind of perfect peace.
Hmm. It feels like it transcends your everyday self.
For the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, these aren't just random feelings. He'd say they're like windows into how reality actually works.
Deep insights. Yeah.
So today we're embarking on, well, a truly intense and deeply revealing journey. We're doing a deep dive into The World as Will and Representation, Volume 2 by Schopenhauer.
And this isn't a light beach read, is it?
Definitely not. It's a systematic, pretty rigorous exploration of existence, desire, suffering. And honestly, it can profoundly shift how you see your own inner life and, well, the whole world around you.
Indeed. And while many who follow philosophy might know the basics from Volume 1, those big ideas about the will and representation, Volume 2 is where he really fleshes it all out.
He expands on it.
Hugely. He expands, clarifies, elaborates on everything he introduced before. It's in Volume 2 that he moves past just the theory and gets into the practical implications, the why and the how of his philosophy as it touches, human experience, ethics, art.
Right, the real world stuff.
Exactly. Even our understanding of love and death. This second volume gives you the detailed arguments, the examples, the really deep, often startlingly clear examination of our lives within his whole metaphysical system. It's where the grand structure of his thought really takes shape.
So our mission today is to unpack Schopenhauer's most potent ideas from this second volume. We really want to understand what he truly means by will and representation in maybe a deeper, more nuanced way.
And see how they connect to our lives.
Yeah, explore how these concepts illuminate our everyday struggles, those moments of connection, even the flashes of joy we experience. We're going to try and extract those crucial nuggets of insight that help us see the world through this, well, powerfully different lens.
A lens that might just explain why things feel the way they do sometimes.
In ways that can be both, exhilarating and maybe a bit heartbreaking.
Right. And look, while it might sound like incredibly dense academic stuff and parts of it are challenging, no doubt Schopenhauer offers these unique aha moments, things that just resonate deeply with being human.
You read it and think, that's why I feel that way sometimes.
Exactly. He gives you this robust framework, maybe a challenging one, often pessimistic, but a framework for understanding why we feel what we feel. Why the world often seems like this stage for, well, endless conflict and striding.
And maybe even a path towards something else.
And maybe even how we might find a path to a more meaningful, perhaps less suffering-filled existence, even if you don't fully buy into his final conclusions,
It's about getting that different perspective.
Precisely. Gaining a unique perspective that can help you contextualize your own inner experiences and the broader, often pretty turbulent currents of human nature. Reestablishing the foundation, will and representation, briefly, as context for Volume 2.
All right, so for those already familiar with Schopenhauer's Volume 1, this bit will just be a quick refresher just to make sure we're all grounded before we dive into Volume 2 specifics.
Good idea, setting the stage.
You'll remember Schopenhauer, heavily influenced by Kant, right? He basically says the world we experience, everything we see, hear, touch, think about, it's fundamentally our representation.
Not reality as it is in itself.
Exactly. It's reality as it's filtered, structured, kind of constructed by our own minds. Our intellect frames everything. It's like wearing specialized glasses that shape everything we perceive.
Precisely. That phenomenal world, the world of objects, cause and effect, space and time, the world we live in day to day, is governed by what he calls the principle of sufficient reason.
Meaning everything has a reason, a cause.
Yes. It's all understandable through our intellect. But that's the veil of Maya, as he famously calls it, borrowing from Hindu thought. It's the world as appearance, not the ultimate reality beneath.
But, and this is crucial, Schopenhauer thought we could peek behind that veil.
That was his big move beyond Kant, in a way. He argued there's something behind this representation, a deeper inner essence that actually manifests as all these representations we experience.
And that's what he calls the will.
The will, yeah.
So if the world we see is just the surface, the representation,
Like the waves on the ocean.
then the will is the turbulent ocean itself underneath. This blind, irrational, ceaseless, striving force.
And it's crucial to get this. It's not a conscious decision-making thing like when you or I will ourselves get up in the morning.
No, it's way more primal.
Much more primal, universal, impersonal. It's the fundamental reality. And that's the critical distinction. If we connect this to the bigger philosophical picture, the will is Schopenhauer's bold answer to Kant's thing in itself. Kant called it the noumenal reality, the ultimate reality beyond our senses, which Kant thought was fundamentally unknowable.
Right. Kant said we couldn't access it directly.
But Schopenhauer claims we can know it, at least partially, and in a very direct, intimate way.
Oh.
Through our own inner experience of willing. We don't just observe our desires from the outside like a scientist studying an ant. We are those desires. We feel the striving, the urge, the constant push and pull within ourselves.
That immediate feeling of wanting or striving.
Exactly. That internal, immediate awareness of our own will, Schopenhauer says, gives us a unique window into the fundamental will that makes up the essence of everything that exists.
So it's not just human will.
Not at all. That's vital. It's a metaphysical force underlying all phenomena. It's an uncaused, unending, kind of directionless cosmic energy.
Yeah.
It shows up as gravity, as magnetism, as the force making a plant grow towards the sun.
As animal instinct.
Animal instinct, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, as complex human desire. It just is. Always striving, always manifesting, with no ultimate goal or purpose beyond its own endless activity.
Which raises that big question he tackles.
Yeah.
If it's not conscious, how does it will? How can something blind strive?
Right. And Schopenhauer's answer is pretty radical. He says consciousness or intellect or reason, it's actually a secondary phenomenon. It's just a tool.
A tool for the will.
Right, tool, perhaps even an accidental development that the will produced in complex organisms like us simply to help it manifest more effectively in the world. Consciousness serves the will. The will doesn't serve consciousness.
Wow. Okay. So with that foundation, the world as both representation, appearance, and the manifestation of this blind, striving will reality, Volume 2, really dives into what that means for us.
Exactly. It explores the profound implications, showing how deeply this will shapes our experience, especially our suffering, but also art, morality, love. It applies the framework to, well, everything. To the objectification of the will and the inevitability of suffering, the core of Volume 2.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting and incredibly systematic. Schopenhauer sees the will objectifying itself, making itself concrete in the world.
Manifesting itself.
Yeah, manifesting itself in this grand hierarchy throughout nature. It's all the same fundamental will, he says, but it expresses itself in more and more complex, more articulated ways.
Like layers of complexity.
Exactly. Think of it like a spectrum. It starts with the simplest physical forces, like gravity or electromagnetism.
The most basic level.
Then moves through, say, the processes in plants, growth, reproduction. Then you get animals with their instincts and senses. And finally, there's us, humans, with our, super complex intellect and self-awareness.
It's like the will is conducting a vast orchestra, with each level of nature being a different section, adding complexity and nuance to the overall performance.
That's a great way to put it. And central to understanding this hierarchy are what he calls the Platonic ideas.
Ah, yes, the ideas. Now, these aren't just concepts floating around in our heads.
No.
No. For Schopenhauer, drawing on Plato but adapting him, these ideas act as the fixed, eternal blueprints, the archetypal forms through which the will makes itself manifest.
So like the master pattern.
Exactly. They're distinct from individual things. Individual objects, like that specific tree outside, are just temporary, imperfect copies of the eternal idea of treeness. They exist in space and time. They come and go.
But the idea of tree remains.
The idea of treeness is timeless, unchanging. Each species, each fundamental force of nature, represents one of these Platonic ideas. They are the stable patterns the will adopts in its endless manifestation.
Can you give some more examples? How does that hierarchy work with the ideas?
Sure. So gravity, for instance, is a direct objectification of the will at its most universal, kind of lowest level. It embodies the idea of attraction, maybe.
Okay.
A rock, with its specific material, its cohesion, its shape, is a higher objectification. It embodies certain ideas of physical form, stability, inertia.
Higher than just raw force.
Higher, more specific.
Right.
Then a plant is higher still. It displays the idea of life force, growth, reproduction, responding to light. More complex organization.
Makes sense.
An animal, with its movement, its senses, its instincts, its rudimentary consciousness, embodies even more complex ideas. The idea of perception, of directed action based on desire.
Getting closer to us.
Exactly. And then human beings. With our intricate intellect, our ability for abstract thought, language, complex emotions, and crucially, our agonizing self-awareness, we represent the will's highest, most complex, and importantly, most individuated objectification in the world of representation.
The top of the ladder, so to speak.
In terms of complexity of manifestation, yes. This hierarchy of ideas provides the stable, intelligible structure for the whole phenomenal world we experience. It's the ladder the will climbs to express itself in increasingly sophisticated ways.
So, okay, with the will's most complex manifestation,
Yeah.
sounds important. What does this actually mean for us? Does it make life better?
Well, here comes the famous Schopenhauer pessimism. For him, being the highest objectification of this ceaseless, blind will, it actually means we're uniquely positioned for suffering.
Oh, great. Why?
Because the will, by its very nature, is infinite striving. It never rests. Therefore, desires are never truly permanently fulfilled. Achieving one desire just immediately opens the door for the next one.
Or boredom, right? He talks about boredom.
Or boredom, exactly.
Yeah.
If desires are met too quickly or easily, we fall into this painful emptiness, this lack of striving, which is itself a form of suffering. It's this relentless, inescapable treadmill. Wanting leads to temporary relief at best, then more wanting, or the pain of having nothing to want.
But why is the will itself inherently painful? Why can't striving feel good?
Well, that's a core question. And what's fascinating and quite counterintuitive is his answer. He argues the very essence of the will is lack, want, striving. Think about it. To strive for something means you currently lack it.
Right. Desire implies absence.
Precisely. It's like a perpetual hunger. Even when you eat a meal, the underlying condition of needing sustenance hasn't gone away. It just asserts itself again later, or maybe it shifts to thirst, or wanting warmth, or companionship. Even when a specific goal is reached, the fundamental striving of the will hasn't stopped.
It just finds a new target.
It just redirects its aim. So, true, lasting contentment, perfect happiness, in Schopenhauer's view, that's an illusion. It's always just a fleeting cessation of a particular pain or lack, not a positive state in itself.
He really flips things on their head there, doesn't he? Usually we think of pleasure as the positive goal and pain as the negative thing to avoid.
He completely reverses it. For him, pain and suffering are the positive experiences, in a philosophical sense, meaning they are the things we directly feel, the palpable reality of the will's constant striving and dissatisfaction.
Whereas pleasure?
Pleasure is merely the negative, the absence of pain, the temporary interruption of suffering. Think about how acutely we feel a toothache. Its presence is undeniable.
Yeah, you can't ignore it.
But we often only notice the absence of the toothache when it finally stops. Or we only appreciate health when we're sick. Pleasure, for him, is that relief, that quiet after the storm, not the sunshine itself.
Wow, that's a profound reversal. But it feels incredibly bleak. Are there really no moments of genuine, positive joy in his view? Is every happy moment just a not-suffering moment that challenges everything we instinctively seek?
It is bleak, and it's meant to shake us up. He'd argue that what we label joy or happiness is fundamentally rooted in relief from a prior state of want or tension. The pleasure of eating, relief from hunger, the joy of success, relief from the struggle to achieve it. The happiness is always after the striving, after the tension is released.
So it's not nihilism exactly, but...
It's not necessarily advocating giving up, but it's a radical description of our condition. And if you take it seriously, it forces a massive reconsideration of our constant chase for external rewards. Buying the next gadget, getting the promotion, finding the perfect partner.
We think that will be a thing that brings lasting happiness.
Exactly. Culture tells us that constantly. But Schopenhauer suggests these are just ways we feed the will's endless cycle. They provide temporary relief, maybe, but the underlying striving engine just keeps running. Is he giving us a dark truth? Or maybe a key to understanding the futility of certain kinds of pursuits leading towards a different kind of freedom?
It definitely challenges our whole consumer culture, the endless pursuit of more.
Absolutely. It cuts right to the heart of it.
Okay, so where does our amazing human intellect fit into this picture? Our reason, our consciousness, our cleverness, surely that gives us some control.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But nope. Schopenhauer is adamant. The intellect is not the master, it's the servant.
The servant of the will.
Precisely. Our reason, our consciousness, all our clever planning, it's just a sophisticated tool that the will developed in complex beings like us to better achieve its own blind, relentless ends.
He uses that analogy, right? The blind giant and the seeing man.
That's the one. The will is the strong, blind giant, providing all the power, the drive, the fundamental direction, which is just endless striving. The intellect is the seeing but lame man riding on the giant's shoulders.
So the intellect can see the path, warn of dangers.
It can guide, navigate, point out obstacles or opportunities, but the giant, the will, provides all the motive force and ultimately determines the journey's non-destination, just more striving. It's like a really smart GPS system for a car that's just driving aimlessly forever.
That's a bleak image. So it's connected to evolution then.
Directly. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. The intellect, with its amazing capacities for foresight, planning, memory, communication, complex problem solving, why did it emerge?
To help us survive and reproduce, presumably?
Exactly. Not to give us ultimate control over our desires or to lead us to philosophical truth or even lasting happiness. It emerged to make the will's manifestations us more effective in the world of representation.
Better at finding food, avoiding predators, building shelter.
Finding mates, raising offspring, organizing societies, all sophisticated strategies developed by the will using the intellect for its own self-preservation and propagation. The intellect serves the fundamental will to live that throbs through all existence. It ensures the species keeps playing the game.
So, okay, powerful, ceaseless, suffering-inducing will. Intellect as its unwilling or unknowing servant. Sounds like we're completely trapped in this cycle. Is there any way out, any relief at all?
It does sound pretty grim, doesn't it? But yes, Schopenhauer does offer pathways to, let's say, temporary relief and potentially something more profound.
Okay, I need to hear this.
The first and perhaps more accessible path is through art, aesthetic contemplation. This is where his philosophy offers a genuine glimpse of respite from the relentless march of desire. 3. Aesthetic contemplation, the temporary respite.
Art as an escape. Okay, I can see that. That feeling I mentioned earlier, getting lost in music or a painting.
That's exactly it. Schopenhauer argues that in genuine aesthetic contemplation, when we truly engage with a work of art, we can momentarily silence the inner clamor of the will.
How does that work?
What's fascinating is how it works. It's not about the art fulfilling some personal desire or relating to your practical life or even just being pretty. It's about recognizing the universal form, the Platonic idea that the artist has managed to capture and express.
The blueprint again.
The blueprint, the essence. When you truly appreciate, say, a stunning piece of sculpture, or you're absorbed by a powerful drama, you momentarily cease to be just you, this individual bundle of wants, needs, fears, and history.
You forget yourself.
You forget your individual self, driven by personal will. Instead, you become what Schopenhauer calls a pure, will-less subject of knowledge. Your ego, your desires, they just fade into the background.
And you just perceive.
You perceive the universal essence embodied in the artwork, the idea itself, independent of how it relates to your life or your goals.
Can you contrast that with how we usually look at things?
Sure. Think about looking at a beautiful landscape. If your first thought is, wow, I'd love to own this land, or I could build a great house here, or even this reminded me of my childhood holiday.
Then you're still connecting it to yourself, to your desires.
Exactly. You're perceiving it through the lens of your individual will, acquisition, comfort, memory, utility. That's the will still running the show. But if you can lose yourself entirely in its pure form, the colors, the lines, the light, the underlying feeling or essence of mountainous or riverness.
Just being with it, without an agenda.
Just being with it, contemplating its idea without relating it back to your personal striving. That, for Schopenhauer, is aesthetic contemplation. And in that moment, you are liberated from the pressure of the will. You experience a moment of pure, disinterested knowing.
Which is a relief from the constant wanting.
A profound relief, a temporary escape from the suffering inherent in striving.
That makes intuitive sense, especially with music. You mentioned music earlier. It feels like it hits differently.
Oh, absolutely. And Schopenhauer gives music a unique, exalted place in his hierarchy of the arts. It's crucial.
Why is it the highest?
Because unlike painting, sculpture, or literature, which still represent things in the world, they depict objects, people, scenes, which are themselves objectifications of Platonic ideas. Music, he argues, bypasses the ideas altogether.
Doesn't represent an idea.
No. Instead, music directly expresses the will itself. It's a direct copy, an immediate language of the will's inner nature, its striving, its tension, its release, its joy, its sorrow.
Wow, so it's like hearing the will's emotions directly.
Pretty much. It speaks the language of the will's inner movement, its emotional core, without needing an image or a concept or any object from the world of representation to mediate it. It bypasses that whole layer.
It goes straight to the source.
Straight to the source. It's the will's most direct utterance. That's why it can affect us so profoundly and immediately. It offers the purest form of aesthetic experience, connecting us directly to the ultimate reality behind appearances.
So who makes this possible? Who creates the art that gives us this escape?
That's the role of the artistic genius.
The genius. What's
Yeah.
special about them?
The genius, for Schopenhauer, possesses an extraordinary capacity for this disinterested perception we've been talking about. They can see beyond the individual things, beyond their practical uses or relations, to grasp the underlying universal forms, the Platonic ideas.
They see the treeness more clearly than the rest of us.
Much more clearly, more intensely, and more consistently. They see the universal human condition in a specific story, the essential form in a landscape, the core emotion behind a fleeting expression. They have this heightened ability to become that pure, will-less subject of knowledge.
And then they translate it for us.
Exactly. They perceive these ideas and then have the technical skill and drive to embody them in their chosen medium: painting, music, poetry, making that perception accessible, even if only fleetingly, to the rest of us.
Which raises that important question. Can anyone do this? Or is it just for geniuses?
Schopenhauer suggests it's more of a spectrum. The genius lives in the state of heightened perception more often and intensely, and can objectify it in great art. But ordinary individuals, he thinks, can also achieve moments of genuine aesthetic contemplation, especially when guided by the work of a genius.
So art helps us access that state.
Yes. The artist acts as a kind of guide, leading us through their creations to these moments of will-less knowing. They allow us to glimpse the world's deeper structure and temporarily lift the burden of our own striving will.
Okay, so art is a temporary escape, a beautiful, even necessary one, it sounds like. But it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. The will keeps striving afterwards.
Precisely. It's a pause button, not a stop button. It's a momentary transcendence. For a more profound, more lasting liberation from the whole cycle of desire and suffering, Schopenhauer turns away from aesthetics and towards ethics.
Ethics, okay.
Yes, towards a much more radical way of living, one that aims to fundamentally change our relationship with the will itself. 4. The ethical path. Compassion, asceticism, and the denial of the will to live.
All right, let's unpack this ethical side. You mentioned earlier that if we're all just manifestations of the same underlying will.
Then our suffering is fundamentally shared.
Right. My pain, your pain, everyone's pain. It all comes from the same source, that same restless striving. Schopenhauer argues that really getting this deep down is the true basis for morality. It leads to compassion.
Compassion. Or Mitleid in German, which literally means suffering with. And what's fascinating here, again, is how different this is from other ethical systems. For Schopenhauer, morality isn't about following rules handed down from God or obeying some abstract rational principle like Kant's categorical imperative.
He wasn't a fan of Kant's ethics.
Not really. He found it too cold, too intellectual, detached from real feeling. Schopenhauer reads morality in something much more direct, more intuitive, this insight into the metaphysical unity of all beings.
Seeing yourself in others?
Seeing that the other person's suffering is, in a fundamental way, your suffering. When you genuinely feel another's pain, not just think, oh, that's too bad, but actually feel it empathically, you are momentarily breaking through the illusion of your own separate ego.
The illusion of separateness, what did he call that?
The principium individuationis, the principle of individuation, the way reality appears to us as separate things in space and time. Compassion pierces through that veil. You recognize that the suffering you see out there is actually the suffering of the one universal will, which is also your own deepest essence.
And that feeling drives moral action.
That immediate identification drives truly selfless action. Anything done out of self-interest, even if it looks good on the surface, isn't truly moral for Schopenhauer, because it's still serving the individual will. Real virtue comes from this selfless suffering with, this understanding that their burden is, deep down, also yours. It's about empathy, not duty.
That's a really powerful idea of compassion. But, okay, here's a tough question. How practical is that? I mean, identifying with everyone's suffering sounds like it would just make us suffer constantly. Does compassion actually stop the will inside us?
That's a very sharp point, and Schopenhauer absolutely acknowledges it. Compassion, while it's the foundation of all true morality and changes how we act towards others, it doesn't actually extinguish the striving will within ourselves. It might redirect it, make us alleviate others' pain, but it doesn't free us from our own inherent cycle of desire and suffering.
So it makes us better people, but not necessarily liberated people.
In a sense, yes. For a more profound liberation, a true escape from the entire game, Schopenhauer points towards something far more extreme, far more radical. Asceticism.
Asceticism, right. Monks, hermits, denying yourself things.
Exactly. It's a conscious, deliberate, and pretty uncompromising turning away from all the ways we usually affirm the will.
How does that work? What does it actually involve?
Well, it's a path deeply influenced by the traditions he admired, Buddhism, Hinduism. It involves a systematic renunciation of the will to live in its common forms.
Like what?
Things like overcoming the powerful urge to reproduce, chastity, embracing voluntary poverty, turning away from material possessions and comforts, actively renouncing pleasures not just because they're fleeting, but because they actively feed and strengthen the will's grip on us.
So, denying every desire.
Essentially, yes, denying the will to live that normally drives us to seek pleasure, avoid pain, perpetuate ourselves, and cling to existence.
Isn't that completely life-denying? It sounds incredibly negative.
That's the common reaction, and it raises that crucial question. Schopenhauer would say, no, it's not life-denying, it's will-denying. And for him, denying the will is the only path to true freedom from suffering.
Freedom from the cycle, not finding happiness within it.
Exactly. It's about breaking the chains of desire and pain altogether, rather than just trying to manage them better or find slightly longer periods of relief. The goal is to gradually extinguish the individual will's attachment to the world. To starve it out, you could say.
Starve the will.
By systematically detaching from everything that affirms it, food beyond basic need, sex, comfort, status, achievement, even, ultimately, the simple desire to keep on existing as an individual.
That sounds almost impossible, especially today. Our whole world seems built on encouraging desire, not denying it.
And that really hits the nail on the head regarding the challenge. Think about trying to practice this radical denial in our modern, hyper-connected, consumer-driven society. It's almost unthinkable.
Everything pushes us the other way.
Completely. Advertising, social media, economic pressures, cultural values, they all constantly scream, want more, achieve more, consume more, be happy through things. Success is defined by accumulation, status, projecting an image of fulfillment.
How do you practice voluntary poverty when wealth is idolized? How do you embrace chastity when romance and sex are presented as essential to happiness?
It's a fundamental clash. Schopenhauer isn't just suggesting a minor lifestyle change here. He's proposing a total inversion of our usual drives, a complete turning away from almost every impulse that society reinforces.
So is it even realistic for most people? Or is this an ideal for, like, spiritual superheroes?
That's the big question about its practicality. Is this a path only a tiny handful of saint-like figures can ever hope to walk, akin to monks in remote monasteries? Or is there some way for ordinary people to apply this principle, maybe by just tempering the will rather than fully denying it? It makes you wonder if his ultimate solution, while logically consistent within his system, remains an almost unattainable ideal for life as most of us live it.
So let's say someone does manage this incredible feat. They follow the ascetic path, they deny the will. What happens then? What's the goal?
The ultimate aim, the destination of this path of will denial, is a state he calls will-less knowledge. It's a state of profound peace where the individual, having finally extinguished all personal desires and attachments, finds liberation.
Will-less knowledge. He sometimes calls it nothingness, right? That sounds scary.
He does use terms like nothingness, but it's crucial to understand what he means. It's nothingness only relative to the world of phenomena, the world defined by the will and representation. It's not absolute nihilistic oblivion.
Okay, so not just disappearing into blackness.
No. Think of it more as a transcendence. It's moving beyond the entire framework of striving, suffering, individuality, space, time, everything that constitutes our normal reality. From the perspective of the will, which only knows striving in objects, this state is nothing because there's no thing left to desire or grasp.
But from the perspective of the person who achieves it.
It's the cessation of the individuated will and all the suffering that comes with it. It's getting off that wheel of Ixion he mentions, the mythical king eternally punished on a spinning wheel, which symbolizes the endless cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. It's liberation.
Like nirvana in Buddhism.
Very much like nirvana, or the absorption into Brahman in Hinduism. Concepts he explicitly references and finds resonance with. It's a state of absolute peace, beyond all determination, beyond all suffering, because the root cause, the striving individual will, has been quieted. It's the ultimate freedom.
Which then leads us to think about the ultimate end for everyone else, the end of individual life.
Yeah.
Death. How did that fit into this picture of will and representation? V. Schopenhauer on death and the persistence of the will.
Okay, so if the will is this universal, timeless, underlying force, what happens when we as individuals die? Does the will die with us?
Not at all, according to Schopenhauer. Death is the end of the individual representation, your specific body, your consciousness, your unique personality, the way the will manifested as you, but it is absolutely not the end of the underlying will itself. So the phenomenon ends, but the essence continues.
Precisely. That's the profound distinction. Death isn't a final stop for existence itself. It's more like a return. The will, which he argues is outside of time and space and is fundamentally unitary, cannot be destroyed. It simply stops manifesting in that particular form.
So my consciousness, my ego, my memories, they dissolve.
They dissolve, yes, because they are part of the representation, tied to the physical brain and the individual perspective. They return, in a sense, to the undifferentiated will from which that individual manifestation emerged.
He uses that analogy of the wave in the ocean, right?
Exactly. A wave has its unique form, its identity for a time. But when it breaks on the shore, the wave disappears. But the water doesn't cease to exist. It just merges back into the vastness of the ocean. The underlying substance, the essence, persists.
So our individual form is temporary, like the wave.
But the underlying will, the water, persists. So it's not personal immortality in the way many religions conceive it, where as you continue consciously after death. It's more of an impersonal immortality of the fundamental life force, the will itself.
Does he think this view helps with the fear of death?
He suggests it might. In a peculiar way, if you see death not as absolute annihilation of being, but as the dissolution of the illusion of your separateness, a return to the fundamental, persistent ground of all existence, then maybe the terror of simply ceasing to be is lessened.
The ego disappears, but the stuff I was made of continues.
The deeper stuff, the will that animated you, remains part of the ongoing cosmic process. The individual dream ends, but the dreamer, the will, continues its restless dreaming through other forms.
That's definitely a mind-bending thought. It makes you question the whole point of individual life if we just dissolve back into the cosmic soup anyway.
It absolutely does raise that question. But before we get to death, the final curtain for the individual representation, Schopenhauer has some really striking things to say about something incredibly powerful during life, something that often feels like the peak of existence. Love. Specifically, sexual love.
Ah, yes. I remember reading this part. He has a really provocative take, doesn't he? Almost cynical.
Deeply provocative, and yes, often seen as cynical or disillusioning. It challenges many of our most cherished romantic ideals by exposing what he sees as a deeper, more primal motivation.
How does he view romantic love, that feeling of being in love?
Well, this is one of his most famous and maybe unsettling arguments, especially in Volume 2. He explains that intense romantic attraction, what we experience as this profound personal connection, may be finding our soulmate, the source of potential great happiness. It's not primarily about the personal joy or fulfillment of the two individuals involved.
No. What is it about then?
It's fundamentally a clever, powerful trick played by the will.
A trick? For what purpose?
For the procreation of the species. Its ultimate aim is to ensure the creation of the next generation in the most biologically advantageous way possible.
So, it just boils down to biology. That sounds incredibly reductive. It strips away all the poetry, the personal meaning.
It does feel reductive, and that's the challenge. For Schopenhauer, that overwhelming, often irrational feeling of being in love, that sense of destiny, the idealization of the other person, it's essentially a magnificent illusion. A beautiful lie, you might say, that the will uses to achieve its own ends.
The lie. How so?
He calls it the genius of the species working through us. This instinctual force overrides our individual rationality, our usual preferences, sometimes even our common sense. It powerfully pushes us towards a specific person.
Why that specific person?
Because, unconsciously, that person possesses traits that, when combined with our own, are deemed by this genius of the species as best suited to produce the most healthy, viable, well-adapted offspring. The intense desire isn't really about our conscious happiness or finding a perfect companion for life. It's about the will's blind, relentless drive to perpetuate itself through new individuals, optimized for survival.
So the lovers are just puppets, instruments for the species.
In this specific context of passionate romantic love, largely yes. They are instruments in this larger impersonal drama of the will's self-perpetuation.
Wow. So the butterflies, the feeling that this is the one, the idealization, it's all just a biological mechanism wearing a very convincing costume.
That's a very good way to put it. It's a cosmic con, dressed up as the highest personal fulfillment. And he'd argue this explains a lot about romance.
I like what?
Like why intense, passionate love often fades, sometimes quite quickly, once the goal, which from the will's perspective is potential reproduction, is achieved or definitively thwarted. Or why there's often disillusionment after the initial infatuation wears off when the genius of the species relaxes its grip and the individuals see each other more clearly, flaws and all.
Because the will got what it wanted or realized it couldn't.
Exactly. The individual's long-term happiness was never the primary objective of that intense, specific drive. The species' continuation was paramount.
Does he talk about other kinds of love, like friendship or family affection? Or is it all just reproductive strategy?
His main focus in this famous section is definitely on sexual love, because that's where the will to live manifests most powerfully and directly in service of the species. He acknowledges other forms of affection, of course, like compassion, which we discussed, but they generally lack that overwhelming, irrational, species-driven urgency that he sees as the hallmark of being in love.
It certainly challenges the whole soulmate idea.
Profoundly. If you see romantic love primarily as this biological imperative, this sophisticated evolutionary trick, well, it changes how you might think about relationships, dating, marriage, the whole search for the one. Are our deepest desires in love truly our own? Or are we just hearing echoes of this impersonal cosmic force?
It forces a serious reevaluation. Okay, so from the grand sweep of the will manifesting in nature and driving love, down to our individual experience of suffering and these potential escapes through art or asceticism, Schopenhauer really does paint a consistent, if often deeply challenging, picture of what it means to exist.
Incredibly consistent. It's a complete, albeit often uncomfortable worldview.
Yeah.
Outro. We've really covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? Diving deep into Schopenhauer's World as Will and Representation, Volume 2. We've seen how he pushes us to look past the surface, the representation, to see this underlying blind, striving will as the core reality.
Yeah, and how that will is fundamentally linked to suffering. That was a key takeaway.
Absolutely. The centrality of suffering stemming from the will's ceaseless, unsatisfied nature. But we also explored the temporary escapes he offers, those moments of pure aesthetic contemplation, especially through music, where we become a will-less subject of knowledge.
A brief respite.
A brief respite, and then the more profound, demanding ethical path, starting with compassion that mitlides, suffering with born from recognizing our shared metaphysical identity.
Seeing the other's suffering as our own.
Precisely, and culminating in that radical ideal of asceticism, the conscious denial of the will to live, aiming for that ultimate liberation, that state of will-less peace.
And finally, tackling death not as an end, but as the dissolution of the individual phenomenon back into the persistent will.
And even reinterpreting sexual love as the will's clever strategy for self-perpetuation. It's a comprehensive, if often sobering, vision.
It really is heavy stuff.
Wow.
Incredibly thought-provoking. Schopenhauer. He doesn't exactly offer easy comfort, does he? No simple optimism here.
Definitely not. No easy answers.
But what he does offer is this powerful, internally consistent framework for understanding some really fundamental parts of being human. Why we strive, why we suffer so much, why we love, what death might mean.
He forces you to question things.
Totally. He challenges us to question our deepest motivations, to look beyond the superficial, and to really ask ourselves if the paths we're chasing are actually serving us or just serving this relentless, insatiable will he describes.
It's a philosophy that demands reflection.
Absolutely. So as you, our listener, go about your day, maybe as you feel that next urge, that next desire, or pursue your next goal, here's something to mull over. Straight from Schopenhauer's world. If all this striving ultimately leads back to suffering, and if every satisfaction is just temporary relief before the next desire kicks in, what then truly is worth pursuing in this world? And perhaps even more profoundly, what might it actually mean to truly want nothing?